Imagine a time when cigarettes were not considered dangerous, addictive, or deadly, but medicinal. A time when doctors openly recommended smoking. When people trusted cigarettes the same way they trusted prescriptions. Today, this sounds shocking, almost impossible to believe, but it happened. And the story of how it happened reveals a disturbing truth about authority, science, and profit. Welcome to True History Show. This is Ishan. Today we associate cigarettes with cancer, heart disease, and slow death. Warning labels are printed in bold. Ads are restricted. Smoking is discouraged everywhere. But this understanding did not appear overnight. It took decades of damage, millions of deaths, and deliberate deception for the truth to finally surface. And before that truth emerged, cigarettes were sold as health tools with doctors leading the message. In the early 20th century, especially in the 1900s and 1910s, modern medicine was still developing. There were no long-term clinical trials, no large-scale population studies, and no deep understanding of chronic disease. Doctors treated visible symptoms, not hidden causes. If a patient complained of stress, nervousness, digestion problems, or a persistent cough, options were limited. This is where cigarettes entered the picture. Tobacco companies did not market cigarettes as luxury products. They marketed them as solutions. Smoking was advertised as calming nerves, aiding digestion, relieving stress, and even helping with asthma and throat irritation. To modern eyes, this sounds absurd, but at the time, it felt logical. Nicotine provided stimulation and short-term relief. People felt better temporarily. That temporary effect was enough to build belief. The most powerful tool tobacco companies used was medical authority. Advertisements featured real doctors or actors dressed exactly like them. White coats, stethoscopes, medical language. Doctors confidently claimed that certain cigarette brands were smoother on the throat or less irritating to the lungs. Some ads suggested that smoking actually protected the voice and cleared congestion. For the average person, this endorsement ended all doubt. Doctors represented truth. And once trust is established, questioning stops. Were doctors lying? In most cases, no. They genuinely did not know the long-term dangers. Smoking-related diseases develop slowly. Lung cancer, heart disease, and chronic respiratory conditions often take decades to appear. In the early 1900s, life expectancy was already lower due to infections, poor sanitation, and workplace accidents. People died before smoking-related illnesses could clearly emerge. This made the connection invisible. Even when early concerns appeared, tobacco companies acted quickly. They did not suppress science directly. Instead, they flooded the conversation with uncertainty. Research was funded selectively. Studies that showed neutral or positive effects of smoking were promoted. Studies suggesting harm were challenged, delayed, or discredited. The goal was not to prove cigarettes were safe. The goal was to prevent certainty. Confusion protected profit. One popular claim was that cigarettes aided digestion. Nicotine suppresses appetite and stimulates the nervous system, creating a false sense of lightness. Another claim was anxiety relief. Nicotine temporarily calms users, masking stress while deepening addiction. Short-term effects were mistaken for benefits. Long-term consequences were ignored. By the 1930s and 1940s, smoking had become cultural. Soldiers received free cigarettes during war. Smoking was normal in offices, restaurants, and hospitals. Doctors smoked during consultations. When something becomes routine, it becomes unquestionable. Cigarettes were no longer just accepted, they were expected. Then patterns began to appear. Doctors started noticing higher rates of lung disease among heavy smokers. Lung cancer cases increased sharply, despite being extremely rare before. Slowly, evidence accumulated. But tobacco companies responded aggressively. Every new study was countered. Every warning was challenged. The public was told the science was inconclusive. This was not ignorance, it was strategy. The longer doubt existed, the longer addiction continued, and addiction meant profit. By the 1950s, the evidence became impossible to ignore. Large population studies showed a clear link between smoking and lung cancer. Heart disease and respiratory failure followed the same pattern. Yet official action remained slow. Smoking was no longer just a health issue, it was an economic one. Governments collected massive tax revenue from tobacco. Millions of jobs depended on the industry. Ending smoking overnight was politically and economically impossible. So warnings were softened. Labels appeared, but language remained cautious. Responsibility was shifted onto consumers. Meanwhile, earlier doctor endorsements remained deeply embedded in public memory. People said, "Doctors used to recommend this," and they were right. Authority, once misused, does not disappear easily. The real shift came in the 1960s, when official medical reports finally declared smoking a serious health hazard. Doctor endorsements were banned from advertisements. Warning labels became stronger. Public perception slowly changed, but by then, the damage was irreversible. Millions were addicted. Millions had already died. This story is not just about cigarettes. It is about what happens when incomplete science meets unchecked authority and massive profit. Doctors were not evil. They worked with limited information. The system around them failed, and those who controlled information chose money over lives. Today, we laugh at the idea that doctors once recommended cigarettes. But future generations may laugh at us too. They may question what we trusted blindly. Supplements, miracle cures, technologies declared completely safe, science evolves, that is its strength. But authority without accountability is dangerous. The real lesson is not to distrust doctors or science. The lesson is to understand that science is a process, not a verdict. And authority must always be questioned, especially when profit is involved. There was a time when cigarettes were medicine, and that medicine created one of the deadliest epidemics in human history. History does not teach us who to trust, it teaches us how trust can be broken. If you enjoyed the video, please like and share and subscribe to The True History Show. Turn on notifications. See you in the next video.